All right, everybody, welcome to this month's Prokochallenge. I am Jeffrey R. Watts, and I am the owner and operator of Watts Atelier. Many of you probably know Watts Atelier. We have 3 different programs. We have a brick and mortar program, which occasionally right now is on lockdown, so we're not doing that. But we also have streaming program, and we also have a online program that you can study progressively as you go. And so the stream is a little bit more like a bridge between our brick and mortar and our actual online. I'm so excited to actually be judging a figurative drawing challenge for Proko. Many of you know that Stan was a past student of mine for maybe a good decade. He taught for us for many years as well. And I'm so proud of what he's gone on to do. And he's done it with such humor and style that I just think it's so him. So I'm really, really proud of him. One of the things that I was looking for in this particular challenge is the things that I value in my own work and the work that I admire from past masters, as well as the Watts philosophy, I would say, or the philosophy that you would find in almost any good atelier, whether it's Florence Academy or wherever. And that's going to be edge, value, anatomical accuracy, and design, which falls into a category called calligraphy, which is kind of like your handwriting. And I'm going to be looking for aesthetics. I'm going to be looking for balance and composition, and basically all the things that comprise really stellar drawing, right? And that's going to be more, again, in the academic realm. So a lot of times when I judge these things, it's hard for me to get past those academic, canons of measurement and proportion and dynamics and rhythm and active and inactive sides and all these great concepts. So that's what I'll be looking for as I go through the work. I won't be able to go through them all, but I'm just going to look, and if something snaps out to me, they're a very small thumbnail, I'm gonna go and dive in a little deeper. So if I don't get to yours, it's nothing personal. I am a pretty intense critiquer, so just know that I'm doing it with love and compassion for you guys, and I know that this stuff is hard work, and I know you guys put a lot into it. I'm sure Stan's really appreciative of that. I'm very appreciative of that. We're both in this battle to promote the traditional values of great representational art, to bring it back to those halcyon days, kind of like the old classical drawings from the turn of the century. So we're heading there, and there's some beautiful work being done, and some of you will be the ones heading the way there. So let's take a look at what you got here. So this image here is really beautifully done, and it looks digital to me. I'm not sure if it was kind of done freehand or maybe done with a little bit of work over the top of the photo. It's very accurate, so it makes me almost think like it was almost manipulated off of the photo. That being said, really beautiful edge work and transitions. I think the hand size steps out to me as being a little bit, maybe this one a little bit large, this one maybe a little bit small. So I would watch that, and it may be just an issue with foreshortening or distortion of the photo, but I would definitely say that's a bit of an issue for me right there. I love the cast and form shadows. Again, really beautiful job. The feet are done really nice. And again, so not knowing whether this is actually what medium this is, which is it's a good sign. In a way, it looks like a really, really tight, hyper tight Bouguereau-esque oil painting. But the way it looks, it leads me to believe that maybe it's a little bit more photo manipulated. That's my only wondering about, And so, because that would definitely, for me, affect how I judge it. But anyway, wonderful job on that one. Okay, this is a nice little graphite drawing, it looks like. Really beautifully done. So when I look at the photo and then I look at the drawing, very accurate. The proportions look really quite good. One thing that always, when I look at in our class, when we have students doing this, is this really graphic background shape that sometimes will actually pop in front of the figure itself because of the hardness around the actual geometry. And it also is very tangent with the front fingers here. So I think that creates a tension. Now there's good tangencies and there's bad tangencies. Sometimes they're very difficult to discern between the two, but I do see that this tension right here kind of bothers me a little bit right where it ends with the apex of the finger here. And I think we need to watch that a bit. Down here, it'd be nice to see a little separation, maybe in the drapery, between the leg silhouette and the background, maybe value. It's very nondescript here. The cast shadows passing over the drapery. The drapery is nicely done, but it feels a little timid to me. So I would want to work a little bit more on that. The perspective, I think it looks like it's a draped drawing bench or something that she's sitting on. Okay, but the way it dusts out so quickly, it's a little bit odd to me. When we look at the figure itself, I think it has quite a bit of redeeming aspects. Again, it's very nicely drawn, very nicely drawn. But maybe the breast popping oddly in front of the tricep, or this little tension right here where you have that little bit of a soft lost edge right there. I don't know if that would have been what I would want to do. I think I'd want to almost hit a little hard edge there to pop the arm in front of the breast or above the breast a little bit, and maybe accentuate the cast shadow underneath from the arm onto the breast so that we can get a little separation. This looks a little odd to me right here. So when I get down into the torso, it looks quite nice. You could work your core shadows a little bit better, or I would say a little bit more, direct. So I like to use cores a lot, so you just got to know that about me. Cast shadow is pretty good here. So again, I would say you can also re-accentuate the core shadows along here, which means to make them more powerful, giving the leg a little bit more three-dimensional impact and power. And that's partly due to the fact that the photograph's a good photograph, but it's a little blown out, and it has a lot of reflected light and secondary lights coming in that are blasphemizing or playing down a little bit the directness of the light source, which can be fine. It's actually kind of fun to play with. But yeah, overall, very nice effort. Very nice effort. Now, this is a beautiful drawing, very much reminiscent of some of Stan's work and also Steve Houston. Steve's very powerful draftsman, as we all know, and painter, and great guy. I really like the power of this piece, very strong cores, very full contrast. That's something I always do look for in my own work, is those really, 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 I just really value strong efforts, where you really go in and you say, hey, this person's committed to these shapes and really knows what they're doing. I'm such an anatomy nerd, I really just nerd out on all the little particulars of the anatomy, and I'm a very big fan, as you know, of like people like Alphonse Mucha, J.C. Leindecker, and the really heavy shape designers. And so a lot of times I like to break down my intermediate halftones with a combination of lassoing the shapes and also creating a cross-contouring aspect to how that works. So I think there's some room for improvement over here on the left side, where when I volumetrically look at the size of his back and I look at how straight this line is right here, I would like to see the lat spread a little bit larger and maybe pulling a little bit of the Riley rhythm from side to side of the latissimus, flaring this lat out a little bit more, and then allowing the rib cage, which exists underneath the latissimus, to maybe bow out. So it would come in a little bit more here, and then it maybe have another little animation. And this is maybe something that we would need to invent. I'm going to pull up the image. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but I do still see a little bit more spread there, a little bit more width. He's a big guy. Yoni's a great model, one of our best. These photos were actually taken, I think, at our atelier back when Stan was around. And I just think that should bow out a little bit more there. But anyway, beautiful modeling. It gets a little interesting around the allocranian, and then you've got a little bit of the anconius muscle coming off of that bone protrusion here, and that looks really weird to me a little bit there. That's almost too interesting. So when we look at the photo, it's a little more subtle, and what you've done is you've accentuated a piece of information that I would have been a little more discerning with, a little more careful with. And then, of course, the head of the tricep, it's not being flexed, so it's quite relaxed. This is nicely done. This is maybe getting a little straight here and a little sharp right here. So maybe bow that a little bit out, open it up a little bit, and soften it up a little bit. I think that's gotten a little too firm. But really beautiful job. This is a very standout little drawing. I really, really appreciate the effort on that one. So excellent job. This is a fascinating little piece. Looks digital, obviously, to me, from down some of these strokes down here. Give it away. Digital is not really my wheelhouse, but I do really fully appreciate that medium. And it's one that I do have on my bucket list to really dive into and see what I can do with it. But I like it. I like this piece. So it's a powerful pose with Yoni. The pose is great, but it is very active on both sides. And when you have equally active sides, I would really encourage you to pick one to really dominate. And that's probably going to be this side over here, simply because of the contorted thrust of the accordion effect, where if you think of Bridgman is one of my favorites. Yoni is quintessential Bridgman physique. It looks like he just walked out of the book. And it's a lot of concepts of active and inactive sides and things which we call muscle insertions and wedging. And so when you look at that piece, I think we had some opportunity here to thrust out or to even bow out a little bit more with this side, and then to even round out a little bit more active. Now, this is a little bit of design work that would go under the header of invention, because we're manipulating the reference. We're not being manipulated by the reference. And that's something I really want to reiterate is I would really encourage everybody to not really follow verbatim the reference, but to actually explore accentuating aspects of it based on what it is that you're trying to get across in your image. The butt cheek on him looks a little odd in the photo, and it looks a little odd in the piece. I would have bulked up that medius muscle a little bit, and I would have looked at this rhythm here, the subrhythm of the medius muscle, which is the small butt muscle, and the maximus is below it, and then we have the minimus, which we will not see. So when we look at this crease, which is the oblique muscle and the iliac crest, then we get into the sacrum area, and this is where we have one part of the medius, and then we have the other part here. And I just feel like this has gotten a little wishy-washy for me, okay? Also in here, we have an opportunity to flesh out this quad a little bit maybe better. And so I think it's a really interesting piece. Good job. And I think there's a lot of room for little subtle improvements within the subcontext of the anatomy itself. So now this is a really cool little drawing. It's got some of that kind of industrial look that my drawings a lot of times have, which is that really like Drew Struzan kind of containment of the halftone, designing intermediate halftones, lassoing them, creating specific shapes out of them, and using cross-contouring along with large tonal masses to give it a really nice combination of linear and tonal. Now, when I look at this relative to the photo, one thing I see a little bit is that the head's gotten a little large. Now, he's slumped over, he's a big dude. Now, this is really important. Because you've got such beautiful rendering in this drawing, and I can't get past that head being too big. It's a beautiful head, too, by the way. So you've done a really, really wonderful job, and the head is going to be the one that breaks this drawing. I have to say, if I cover the head up with my hand as I'm sitting here, it looks quite good. Everything looks like it holds together pretty good. I pull my hand away and I go, big head, big head. If I was looking at this as a student in my own atelier, I would do that. I would walk by and I would say, because I've done it for so long, 30 years, thousands and thousands of these kind of drawings, I would immediately just say big head, watch that head size. Because it just jumps out. And when your eye is that attuned to proportion, it just sees those things almost effortlessly. What you want to do is get to that point where you can see your own proportions on your own drawing efforts that way without having to need the use of another eye that's maybe got more mileage than yours. And it will get there. It will get there, trust me. Especially with efforts like this, you're very close. So wonderful job. I think the feet get a little bit busy and a little bit noisy for me. I would probably put a veil of tone over them, play them down a little bit. Don't let them become too important. There's also, if you look at the reference, there's an arch present that kind of makes almost a U shape between the 2 feet. You've closed that gap down. You've minimized the negative shape. I would have accentuated it and allowed that rhythm to kind of pick up a subliminal rhythm between the 2 feet. Because right here it gets real veiny, it gets real bulbous, and I'm not agreeing with the anatomy on this part of the foot down here. So watch that. Beautiful hand. You've done a little bit of drama to the hand. You've invented a little bit. So I think a wonderful, wonderful effort. If that head size is I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker for me. Basically, just start pinching in on all the perimeter areas of that head. And you might be able to salvage it without having to erase the head. But anyway, great job. So this one it's not a bad little study, but it doesn't have the integrity of anatomy that I would be looking for. Like, you did a beautiful job on this foot, and that's one of the hardest parts of the whole painting. When I look at this torso, I see such beautiful cast shadows and shadow information that's been almost completely lost here. I don't know where this shadow went right here. We got the linea aspera, which is your center abdominal line separating out the wall of the abs, and that's almost non-existent. It's quite strong in the photo. I would have probably capitalized on that, and I probably would have used it more. I would have created a core shadow here and darkened the shadow probably over on the rib cage a little bit. I would have drawn through and figured out where the rib cage was, the lat spread, the breast rhythms. So there's a lot of opportunity here. It's a very strange little study to me, only from the standpoint that it's floating here, almost like it was, again, painted and then cut out using a lasso tool. But you've got this kind of weird, kind of interesting, kind of jaggedness around the outside, which is strange to me. Whereas if I was painting that, I would have cleaned that up a lot. I would have looked for this being maybe squaring off the rear a little bit here, so it's not just a generic round into another round. And I would have probably bowed the quad a little bit differently. I'm not sure about this dark sliver shape you've got here. Be careful with these kind of things. A nice effort. I just am, again, curious as to why it's so cut out. Anyway, decent job. A lot of room for improvement on the anatomical edge manipulation, edge containment, and delineation of actual between the lights and darks, and keeping your edges very integrous. Okay. Okay, so this is it's not bad. It's not bad. It's quite accurate. It's got a little bit of a cutout feel to it. It's looking a little. I think the cores could be a lot darker and stronger. So if I look at along here, and I look at the reference, we need to really work on the core as it fluctuates in and out of the scapula. There's a lat coming through. You've got ribs, indication coming through the multifidus, the erector muscles coming up the spine. So we have some complexity here that's being lost in your piece that I think would want to be capitalized on. For example, this little fracture line here is the lower aspect of the latissimus attaching onto the top of the iliac crest, which would create the two dimples of the sacrum would be right here, and the coccyx right here. So this would be your sacral area, and this would be the attachment point. And you've kind of cut it, and it needs more volume. It needs to be a little thicker shadow with a little core on it, and it can be a little harder underneath as it pinches, but this is just, it doesn't work for me, this right here. So be careful with that. This line too has just been kind of put in very softly, but it also, just keep in mind, with this kind of direct lighting, you're gonna have roll, pinch, roll, pinch, roll, pinch, and when it rolls, it's gonna be soft, and then it's gonna pinch and be harder, then it's gonna roll and be soft, then it's gonna pinch and be harder. We've got a very sharp line along the spine. We've got a beautiful opportunity for core manipulation along that side, which is kind of there, but I feel like you're not really capitalizing on that. So look at how people use their core shadows really effectively. I'm very strong with it, I know. Eric's very strong with it at our school. A lot of our teachers are. So just keep in mind that you want to, I think, really fluctuate, open and expand your core shadows according to whether it's going around a bone, a muscle rhythm, a fat pad, a bone protrusion, a ligament, a tendon. What is it? And that's why we really have to know our anatomy. We really want to be very astute students of form and understanding what form that is. It's hard to indicate what you don't know. Decent job. Watch those cores. Some lost edges, some blurred edges around the perimeter would be nice. But that's my 2 cents worth on that one. So this is an interesting little, really nice little academic study. It's actually almost like a burr number pick out, done extremely well. I think it's got a really nice classical kind of Adrian Gottlieb feel, or one of those more Florence Academy paintings, which are extremely academic, but that's okay. I'm extremely academic. What I'm looking for is maybe around the serratus, muscles, the sawtooth muscles underneath the pec, a little more definition as they connect underneath. So again, a little softer on top, a little harder underneath, and defining those a little bit better. I think there's still a little choppiness in your pick out. It may be very well the surface you're working on, but I think the cast shadows could be done a little bit more descriptively and not quite so. They're kind of ambiguous along here. And I would want them to be occasionally a little sharper, especially closer to the source. And he has quite big pecs, so he's going to be casting a pretty strong shadow there. And there's a slightly diffused aspect to the shadow coming off the pec, but I like to firm those up a little bit if you want more structure in there. So it really depends on where you're going with the painting. Do you want to go more towards an ethereal, kind of hazy, gauzy look, or do you want to go with a little bit more in focus? I wouldn't say in your face, but a little bit more direct. Very nice. Proportions are strong. Painting strong. I don't know if you had the intention of putting color on top of this afterwards, but it's really well set up for a nice glazing or scumbly execution on top to bring it up to a full color painting. Very, 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 very nice job. There's so many beautiful efforts. So you guys did a wonderful job, and thank you again for giving me this honor to critique you. This one is digital. It's very creative. I personally don't see myself as an incredible original creator. I'm an extremely good technician. I'll give myself credit for that. That's really what I put my hat on, is just really, really ridiculously strong fundamentals, anatomy skills, everything like that. But I'm not seething with ridiculously creative ideas. I can come up with stuff, but again, when I look at this, it's just a very creative, fun piece. Very nice use of concept. Beautiful hair job up here with, the softness, this red background. I think it just has a kind of a really nice graphic, but also creative idea. So good job. Kudos to you on that one. Yeah, very creative. What I want to really talk about in this one, because it is a very nice drawing, but the way it was photographed is the weakest part of the whole thing. And that is such an easy thing to rectify, right? So get yourself a good SLR camera or shoot it with your iPhone or your iPad and make sure you don't have blurry areas because your drapery in the left is blurry, the knees blurry, the arms blurry, the head's blurry. So there's a focal issue here, and I'm not sure if that was done deliberately. If it was, I wouldn't do it because it almost looks like you took it into Photoshop and blurred areas of it or something. It's a beautiful little drawing. It really has a lot of that old Russian feel, and it's nice. It's simple in a way, almost poetically simple, which is nice. I think it has potential to explore and open up some of the halftones in the quad, maybe in the exposed right area of the shoulder blade and the teres major, the minor, the rotator cuff muscles, some of this activity back here. This is one of the most complicated areas to navigate on the human form, and one that most people don't know enough about. Yoni's got small joints, bigger muscles. It's usually more of a black physique, it just has a tendency to go more towards that. Occasionally you'll see a white guy with that kind of physique, but not as often. It's more of a genetic thing. But when you look at his muscles, they're kind of like very bumpy and lumpy. There's striations within the striations, like if you look at the latissimus, for example. And that's something that can get easy to lose yourself in. And I think we have some ability here to look at these shapes here, lasso them a little bit, and design them a little bit more intricately, which would be under the header of calligraphy. How you choose to lasso and to design those shapes would make a lot of difference. So a beautiful job. And then watch this foot here. That toe, something needs to be done with that one because it's in the photo that way, but man, it looks jacked up. I would redesign this foot. It's not easy, but if I was working with that reference, I would redesign that foot for sure. And that means a little bit of invention, maybe you have to go do a little research, look for a foot like that or shoot your own. Just try to learn how to not copy the reference. If you see something in the reference that doesn't look in alignment with your aesthetic, redesign it. That's really your only option. Get rid of it or redesign it. And you can't really get rid of his foot, so you're going to need to redesign it. So that would be my suggestion on this one. But excellent job. Just maybe shoot it a little bit clearer so I can tell exactly what we're looking at. But good job. That's a very soft, almost Vanderpool type drawing, which I'm a big fan of, Vanderpool. John Vanderpool, the human figure, we talk about him often in our drawing classes. We mostly use him for drawing features, right? Because he just has these really beautiful, quintessential classical style features. But he has a section on there on figure, which is quite informative and helpful, but very few people use it for that. And when I look at this drawing, it has that kind of, not silver point, but lead pencil kind of style of subtlety. I do think there's room to punch more stronger cores and a little bit stronger shadow patterns within it. We're missing some of our upper range to our full contrast, and that's something that I like a lot. So is it absolutely necessary? No. And again, if you want to look in that Vanderpool book, you'll see some drawings that are devoid of full value, but their edges are immaculate, the shapes are beautiful, and they're gorgeous drawings. They just don't have full contrast. And so that's something that we always have to ask ourselves. Do we want to go for that really powerful feel, or do we want to go for more of a very subtle ethereal feel? Things I would look at is maybe like the cast, hard edge here to pop that and really to set him firmly on this tapestry. And then to pull a little cast shadow maybe off of it, and then do a little bit of modeling and work in the drapery. You can let it fade out very quickly, but maybe just a little bit of indication here to show what he's sitting on and that there's some drapery involved. I think the foreshortening here gets a little bit off, and that foot gets a little bit small compared to that head. Now, everything for me goes back to the head. It's the best and easiest way to judge the proportions of the figure. And the proportions of the figure a lot of times are so abstract to measure off of. And on a guy like this, somebody could just have naturally large pecs, and it could throw off the whole drawing. Or big delts, or a tiny waist and big chest. And those things are hard to judge off of each other because they're so abstract. So going back to that head, which does not change with steroids, with fat, or anything, whereas the body can expand and contract greatly with all kinds of different reasons. And the head does not. So the head is a great canon of measurement that I would highly recommend going off of. But otherwise, the drawing's quite nice. I think he did a wonderful little job on that. It's very nice. Now this is a little different here. I haven't picked a 3D piece yet, and here's an actual sculpture. And you submitted a couple different poses of it from different angles. So it's has a very cartoony look to it, which I think is cool. It looks like it was deliberate. I don't think you were going for like 100% accurate proportions, but were rather playing with it a little bit more creatively. And from that standpoint, I'll give you kudos for that. But it's difficult for me to critique because my criteria for critique is going to be how are the edges, how are the values, how are the shapes, whether that's done digitally, whether that's done three-dimensionally in clay or whatever. It's still going to come back to the insertions, the origins, and the illusion of those shadows that are being created in a three-dimensional form. And that you can critique almost as easily or as directly as you could an actual drawing. I could, but I might be completely missing because of the fact that it wasn't intended to be that accurate. Okay? Now this is a beautiful drawing that is just missing. It's frustrating because it's just missing. Like this delta is way too anemic, way too atrophied, way too small for the size of the chest, for the size of this arm. But this is very Fetchin-esque. There's a Fetchin drawing that this reminds me of that he did that's just absolutely exquisite. It's got a guy seated on the ground, kind of hunched over, and it has this kind of feel to it. I believe it was done on rice paper, probably with lead pencil, which is absolutely a suicide mission because you can't do any erasing whatsoever. It's got some nice stuff. Like this is gorgeous in here, gorgeous. And then this arm just drops it for me. I mean, this arm just doesn't ring true. The drawing's only as good as the worst part of it. If you think about that point, look at your drawing and scour it, and every area has to be respectfully handled, whether it's a accoutrement in the background or some paraphernalia. Anything that's put in needs to be done well. It doesn't have to be, that doesn't mean highly rendered. That means it could be just abstractly done, but done in a beautiful way. So don't get me wrong. But anyway, beautiful job. A little bit wanting in that shoulder. Okay. As we look at the modeling of this 3D job, we want to look at like things like the torso folds. Maybe that needs to be a little thicker where your cast shadow is. The cut line in the hair looks a little toupee-ish to me, and looks a little bit like Max Headrome from the 80s or something. But watch like even this cut line, for example. It should pass over the clavicle into the upper pectoralis. But I do think you did quite a really nice job on it. Again, a very difficult one for me to really kind of totally do my thing as far as critiquing. Now this is a digital painting, and it's got some fun color to it. You got a little gray greens in here, which I like. I always like to play around with abstractions of color. I think we lost it a little bit in here, in this pinch mark area of where the oblique comes into contact with the latissimus, and then we've got some posterior inferior serratus or something. I can't remember exactly right there, but there's a play of some interesting little finger digitation attachments on the back of the spine at the base of it that come out and attach, kind of fan out. And with a guy like him that's built as him, it's not a splayed figure, right? So he's cut, but you're still going to get a layer of fat even on the leanest of people. And it's going to mess with a little bit of the integrity of what you know about those muscle insertions based on academic study. So we want to have that academic acumen, meaning écorché knowledge of the deep levels of the musculature and the bones and where things attach. And like Eric does a phenomenal class on that on intensives, torso intensives, front and back, and arms and legs, where he goes in and works with all those insertions and origins. So you can always look that up if you ever want to kind of maybe work on that a little bit. But I think a very nice job. It's very chiaroscuro, very Velasquez, very Caravaggio lighting. Watch these little guys in here getting carried away with the crease lines. It's kind of like one's good, let's put 62 of them in. You want to use discretion a little bit and be a little bit discerning with repeating successful things. Like if you might put a splash of color somewhere and you say, I really like that. And then you put it 5 different places and now it doesn't mean anything anymore. It meant something because it was kind of an odd one out and it was done really well. So a lot of times we lock onto that and we'll want to just duplicate it and then it doesn't mean anything. So be careful with that. Okay, good job though. Now this one, it's a very interesting little drawing and proportionally it's decent. I think the head's a little big. It puts her into more of that like teenage body type. You always want to, I think, stretch a model out. And this is a very ideal model. The interesting outline around it that's not totally clean like the Steve Houston look, but it's a little bit more, got some controlled sloppiness in it, I kind of like. It reminds me more of a Sarov, maybe. So this drawing, although I don't think it's 100% accurate, I think it has a lot of room of improvement in the lassoing of your shadow shapes and your intermediate shadow shapes, as well as your major shadow tones. I think it's just a nice little sketch. The far leg is a little bit atrophied and looks a little bit anemic to me. When I say atrophied, it means like say you broke your leg and you didn't rehabilitate it. Now you got one leg bigger than the other leg because one leg's muscles have gotten shrunken a little bit and they've gotten a lot smaller. So when I look at her far leg, I would bow the quad out more and thicken up that quad a little bit. And if I look at it in comparison to the other leg, this one's substantially larger and there's maybe a distance of 6 inches between the two, if that. You wouldn't really see a lot of foreshortening. So this is nice. This is another look at this drawing. Very nice job on, especially in this torso region. Kind of phoned in a little bit on the hand, both hands. That's a hard hand. I mean, that hand right there, I can see why you kind of indicated it if that's the case, because that hand would kill me. It's hard when it goes this accurate to this blown out. It almost looks like a deliberate cop-out. It's almost like the old flower pot where you put the leg in a flower pot. So watch that hand, watch the size and indication of that hand, and watch the compound fracture in the shin on this leg. It bows here, it bows here. It creates a rubber lower leg, or a bone has been broken right there, and it's kind of just, So watch that area right there. Watch the straightness on the quad. I see it. I'd like to see it more bowed. I would exaggerate the concavity or the convexity. I would dome it, right? It's too straight, and then it drops down with a little bit of a sweep here. I don't necessarily agree with that. So that's my input on that. But a beautiful job in this region. You really knocked it out of the park there. Okay, yeah, so it caught my eye from a distance. And then when I get up on it, I start to scrutinize proportion, edge, containment, manipulation. These are all things that are, again, I value in my own work. I value in my students' work, and I encourage it. There's an old saying, good from far, but far from good. I don't want to say that like it's not a bad drawing, but it looks better from a distance than it does close up. What I want to do is have that impact that you've got from a distance, and then it looks good from every distance forward. If I walked up and sniffed the paint, if I was 6 inches off of that drawing, I would want to be able to enjoy every little nuance in that drawing. And it's just not holding together for me when I get up closer on it. It means like these shapes have got, this hand's gotten a little small. The cores have gotten lost in here. The shapes have gotten doughy and a little bit nondescript. And I think the lassoing and the design within the intermediate halftones that are relegated to the light. So we have halftones that are going to be in the shadows. We have halftones that are going to be in the light. We have the light itself, halftones that belong to the light. We have shadow and halftones that belong in the shadow. And we want to make sure that those are always adhering and belonging to the family that they're supposed to belong to. And when I look in here, I have a difficult time discerning where the halftones that are belonging to the shadows are and which ones are belonging to the lights, partially because our shadow pattern itself has gotten too light. And the core shadow has to be a lot stronger and darker, and the shadow within here has to be darker, and we can have halftones that are relegated or within that shadow, but they have to belong in that shadow. This has gotten too light. This has gotten too light. If we were to darken all this up and then redarken up the core and allow this to become the reflected light, because our core shadow now has made this look lighter, rather than trying to pick out our lights, because these lights here are competing with the halftones that should belong out here. So it's breaking the form down. It's not getting as much bang for your buck. The other thing is just bing, 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 bing. These darks that are making me almost like a ping pong or a pinball machine, where the ball's just hitting off all kinds of things, and it's making my eye go all over the place. I don't like that kind of jarring movement through a drawing. I want it to be a poetic movement through the drawing, more like a dance or a symphony. I want it to flow. I want to stop here because it's more rendered, and then I want to go over here, and I want to kind of look at it, but it's not as rendered, but it's not poorly done. And then I go over here, and I want to travel through that drawing, and I want you as the artist to tell me where I'm going to go, to tell me how long I'm going to stay there, and to tell me what it is I'm supposed to look at. And on this drawing, I'm having a hard time finding that, okay? So good job. Watch that head size. You snuffed a lot of it, but it looks a little small to me. So this one's got, like, again, kind of a Boris Vallejo, Frazetta kind of feel. I'd like to see some variation of the handling of the paint. Thinner in some areas, thicker in other areas. Load your lights, thin your darks. Load your lights, thin your darks, right? The old saying. And right here, it's kind of equally loaded all over the place. And your shadows do look a little thinner, but I would just say watch that. Watch how Frazetta does. He's masterful at glorified pick out with some areas painted opaquely and the rest of it allowed to blend into kind of more of a suggestive environment. For example, that serpent could be done a little bit more like a Frazetta. You could reference a Frazetta. I think you did a good job. There's a lot of room for improvement in stylizing out the reference and using it as reference rather than as a literal. I would have redesigned this whole leg quite differently. But that goes into advanced figure invention, which means your anatomy has to just be on point. So what I think I've seen a lot today is this idea that we still need a lot more in-depth knowledge of anatomy to carry our drawings to that next essential level, okay? Good job. Really nicely done, like the head's beautifully done. As it turns into stone, I think the stone gets a little bit technique-y for me. It gets a little bit like stamp tooled on, you know, where it doesn't feel like there's enough variety and it doesn't really feel like stone to me. It feels almost like a pumicey lava rock or something, which is fine if that's what it was intended to be. But I think it's all the little shapes that are almost, they're too close weight-wise visually. You know, they're very competitive with each other as far as their visual weight, you know, almost like a stippled effect. And I think that's why I'd want to look for a little bit of variation and stuff. The actual painting of the figure, if I look at the figure anatomically and the cast and form shadows, it's pretty good. Maybe watching the tiling, which is occurring with your digital brushes here, having similar weight and look to them. But I do think you did a nice job on it. But there's a lot of beautiful stuff in here, a lot of really neat rhythms and even sub shapes. Like there's nothing that would create a double strip across the sacrum, but I like it, even though it's not 100% accurate, but I like it from a calligraphy standpoint. So sometimes calligraphy doesn't always have to 100% make sense, but enough of it has to make sense so that you can get away with something like that and make it look deliberate. And you've done enough beautiful handling of the form around here to throw in something like that and have it work. If it was a little sloppier, and it is a very chaotic drawing, so you're on the cusp of it being too sloppy, but if even this right here, there's no cut line that runs that far across, really. What I would recommend for whoever drew this is work on the integrity of your abstractions, and you can really learn a lot about that from us because we're probably some of the best. Our school is probably one of the best on the planet for abstractions. That's one of the things I think we've done to really improve on the Riley method is our understanding of abstractions. And I've gone deep into them. So a lot of that could really help you out if you want to go on and take like the advanced quick sketch class in the master section of our program, which you can pay for. It's like $49 a month or for 2 months or something. You could go in and take that with me and learn a lot about abstractions. And I think it would improve your work to that next level. But you're doing great, whoever that is. Really wonderful. Now, this person obviously submitted an actual sequential time lapse of their drawing. And so this is fascinating. I'll take a look at this one. This is new. This is different, you know. So let's take a little look at this and just see how it's coming up. Okay, so you're working the cores nicely. Got your middle value put in, background coming in, midtones. So when I look at it, watch these kind of lines, like across. This is a rounded form of the rear, and you've cut across and left hard edges all along these pencil strokes, and that breaks this form down and flattens his butt. You want to either wrap those lines a little bit. You know, that's where we ask ourselves, do we want to go with or against form? And you've gone across the form and flattened the form. And that is kind of a faux pas for me. You also got a little carried away, and I don't blame you, but with the tumors, you know, like again, a great drawing is a combination of straights and curves, elegantly put together in a masterful way. And it's no different if you're drawing or designing a piece of tech. If you're designing Iron Man, the exoskeleton, or you're designing the new BMW M4, and you want to say, how am I going to get these lines and curves to French together in a way that's incredibly attractive? It's no different than designing the back or designing someone's knee or an elbow. It's a combination of straights and curves knitted together in a way that honors the form. So the form wants to be integrous. And if you get it out of control, like right up in here, that makes no sense to me right there, that tricep. In your defense, it's crazy looking in the photo. I would have redesigned that whole arm and pretty much made a new arm because I do not agree with that arm. And I know it's that way. We're seeing it, it's there, but I don't buy it. So what I would say in that situation is it's a call to redesign. And it's hard, and it's not easy, and there's a lot of chances you're going to chowder it, but you got to give it a shot when you see that. So don't be too literal. If something looks weird to you, you ask yourself, why does it look weird? And if you can academically piece together what looks weird on it, you can say, well, I'm not used to seeing such a compressed ridge muscle combined with tricep. And obviously this guy has it, but that doesn't mean it's going to look good in a piece, right? So people aren't going to see the model. They're just going to see your piece and they're going to say, what's up with that jacked up arm, right? I don't understand that. And that's when we fail, because we're not there to defend ourselves half the time. So people are either going to see it and like it, or they're not. And if they don't, it's not their fault, right? So I would just think about that when you go forward designing, okay? Good job though. Very fascinating to me. It's very nice. The proportions are decent. The hands are always going to be a sticking point with everybody, and always the bane of most artists' existence. You've done a decent job with them. They're tricky in the reference and would require some redesign. The foot here, anatomically, that's not working for me. And if it's a shadow, it's not working for me. So it could have been an accident, but it's not a happy one. Right? When we call happy accidents, that means it's an accident that occurred when we were executing. We didn't intend it, but it actually works in our favor, and we're smart enough to recognize it and we capitalize on it. That's a happy accident. A lot of times accidents don't come out that way, and they need to be adjusted or manipulated. If it's true watercolor, you're in trouble because watercolor doesn't activate well, right? I mean, it's not gouache. You can't go back and manipulate it after the fact. This hard edge around here, if anything, I'd have a core shadow and it would be softer. Be careful that you don't get cutesy technique in front of substance. It's form follows function. The flashiness has to be around substance. Otherwise, it's just flash for the sake of flash, and we don't have substance, and that piece is not going to hold up to the scrutiny of really, really excellent painters and draftsmen. And really, when you're working, I want you all to think about, you're not trying to impress your mom. You're trying to put forth work that could be scrutinized not only from the greatest artists that are alive today, but could be scrutinized by Sargent, by Repin, by Fetchin, by the greatest artists of all time. If they were to come in and do this crit, you'd want them to say, that is an excellent piece. I love everything about that. Not Joe Blow on the corner that's going to be like, oh, that's really cool. It kind of looks like a person. You know, I mean, there's going to be those kind of people, but don't put your weight on them. Put your weight on the people that really have a very well-trained eye and have spent their whole life cultivating an aesthetic that is going to be around for a long time. And there's plenty of them out there. Stan's got that kind of eye. All my teachers do. Many of my students do. And there's many other schools and students out there that have that as well. And we're getting more and more all the time because the training is becoming a lot better. So this is a nice little piece. Now, I'm going to get into the nitpicky of it. I do dig it. What I don't like is this, tangency. Boom, 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 boom. Look at this, right off the butt, into the arc of this circle. I mean, look at this, bam, whap, right into the butt. I would have liked to seen it brought below or brought above and left a little air gap. I don't like that tension visually that's created there. When I cover it up with my thumb, I feel like it's stronger. When I pull it away, I have an issue with it, right? So I love what you're doing. That is such a small issue, and you can fix it easily. After this, you can go back on digital and you can fix it and see what you think about it, right? Or just put another layer over it, maybe play around with it. But I would have dropped them. Okay, so he's got a beautiful form. The girl's got a gorgeous form. But when this butt goes around that generically, I like to square it off a little bit where the butt is being compressed onto the surface that it's sitting on. I want to flatten that butt a little bit and just see if I can put some weight on it, some gravity. But a gorgeous job on the torso. It's really difficult handling here. Watch this mastoid on her. And it's like that in the photo, but my God. And some people are going to have it really strong. And I would play it down on a female. On a guy, you can get away with it a little bit more. But on a female, it just looks weird. So I would want to tone that down. And he did such a beautiful job up on his head and the ear and the hands. I mean, gorgeous job, and they're easy fixes. So go back and try it on a different layer and save your old one and go on and play around with it and see if you take some of those crits and see if it doesn't feel a little bit better to you. Okay, so this one here is, again, very much in that Prudhon, who I love. And Prudhon is a French draftsman who did a lot of toned drawings, white on gray tone with chalk and charcoal. And I'm a big fan of him for a while, but he always drew big heads and short bodies. I don't know if that was a French thing or what, but that's the only thing I could never get past on his drawings was his head size was always too big. That being said, it also has the Steve Houston look. It also has that Stan look, who was, Stan kind of deviated and went towards kind of that Houston-y look after he'd left our atelier. And I think he did a wonderful job. And it's a beautiful looking drawing style. I haven't done a ton of it, but I do like it. And again, but this one feels a little bit more like it has a little bit of a Renaissance influence more as well. And I like kind of almost a double arm up here that was like you drew it once and then corrected it, but left it in. I dig that. I dig that. And again, you've done a better job, I think, of pulling some design out of that tumorish, brachial radialis has melted into his tricep somehow. But I think I like it on yours. This is a huge arm though, and this is a tiny arm. So when I look at the foreshortening on this arm, I don't buy it compared to that arm. And I think this needs to be a lot wider, a lot bigger and thicker as it passes away from us. And then you're probably, if you do bulk that up, you're probably going to end up with this being small, too small in the butt and too small in the legs after you make that correction on that arm. Because this arm is way too big for the legs and the butt. And this arm's way too small for the legs and the butt. There's room for the torso flare to be larger, especially on this side. You could bow out more with the latissimus. So ideally, if you were in a drawing class with me, I'd say, okay, we need to make this arm smaller, this arm bigger, this wider, and then we need to work on this. And we could do that without actually removing the whole drawing, but it would take some work and it would be a little bit of a challenge. But you draw so well, you got to dial in these proportions, my friend, and you are going to be dangerous. Rendering on top of failed foreshortening and flawed anatomy, to me, means not much. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it could have been really good, but, look at this dip here, and look how the leg looks like it was pulled. It's too skinny right here. And it's out of the joint right here. And so the leg, although I think it's fascinating, it's all torn up. Like the hamstrings have been dislocated from the bone attachment and have swollen up down here. Like I watched a guy at the gym that tore his bicep off of the humerus, and it rolled up and bunched up by his delt. And it was all swollen and because he broke the attachment off. When I look at this down here, it looks like that's what's happened to the hamstring. It broke off its attachment point and bunched up low. And so I would watch that kind of stuff because this leg is way more successful, but it also gets too cartoony down here in this sweep, and it looks rubbery in this area. Beautiful handling right in here. This is gorgeous. This is not working for me, and this is not working for me. If I did a tracing over that, I would just go to town on it. And I think you would find when it's done, it would be quite much more successful and stronger, but that would be my job, right? I mean, and that's what I get paid to do. Yeah, good drawing, but those are things that would make it better. So here we've got an ink, and you guys know I'm a big fan of inking. If you want to go on and work with me, I'll do 40 hours of it on our program. I mean, literally 40 hours. And we also have a lot of YouTube stuff. If you want to go over and check out our YouTube channel, you'll find a lot of freebies. You got to be careful when you're inking. It's very important that you're asking whether you're going with and against the form, and whether, because this is very fascinating inking to me, and it's very well done, and you've got a really good hand, but it does not make sense as to the anatomy and how the anatomy wraps and connects. It'd be great if that was an abstraction, maybe in a background where it didn't really need to mean anything. But whether you almost need to either wrap these strokes, and you can again look at the Solomon J. Solomon ink that I did. It deals with a lot of these issues of whether to go with or against the form or this or that. And I think you're doing really well, but you need some training in it. And I think the training maybe needs to go back to your drawing training. And no one ever wants to hear that. It's like, go back, do more anatomical studies in Graphite, in a sketchbook. Yeah, I like it, but I'm still having a hard time with a lot of the way that your lines are passing with and against the form. And then I like this fascinating Moses character up here. But I think the little platform that he's leaning on is a little wonky, and his foot is a little big and cartoony, and this hand gets a little cartoony. So again, it's hard for me to know whether you're deliberately trying to cartoon or that the piece is just taking on a cartoony feel due to lack of solid fundamentals that have been put in place over many, many years of life drawing and classes and training properly, okay? This looks digital to me. And again, there's nothing wrong with digital. I think it's very clever, some of the things you're doing. It's very accurate, almost too accurate in here, like with the hair. I almost want to see a little bit of blurred edges in there, a little bit of organic aspect to it. It feels like a fake bun that was put on her hair. It just looks too perfect. I know it's weird to think of that as someone telling you, hey, it's too good. But that's what it feels like to me. So she has a hyperextended arm somewhat, and that's always hard to deal with. It always looks like the arm is compound fractured. And hers is even stranger because it's going from an arcing, a hyperextension to a pronation or a supination of the extent or the ulna and the radius. So it's like it's bowing this way and then it's twisting this way at her hand. So it's like she's able to turn her arm and then bow it. And all I can say is that's going to be freaking hard to draw. You know, I mean, that's a thesis problem. And I don't have an easy answer for you other than I'd have to take a whack at it and play around with it. But I would cheat it a little bit and I would watch the bow and the elbow and I would play it down and I would let it have a little bit of maybe hyperextension, but nothing that extreme. So that's my biggest issue with it is right in here. So that's kind of Beasley-esque kind of old school look to it, like the way you've handled the little wrinkles and that stuff. Got kind of a cool feel to it. So good job. Yeah, it's very Boris. It's very, it's very Frazetta. You know, you've got the one where he's stabbing the spider and it's one of the iconic Frazettas. And I think you've kind of done a pretty decent little job here. It's a little bit sugary for me back here. It's a little bit bump on a 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 bump. And I'd like to play some of that down a little bit, design it a little bit. Foreshortening on that arm is decent for how difficult it is. That is an extremely hard arm there. So all of you that tried to do that arm, kudos to you for giving it a shot. I'm not trying to be deliberately hard on you. It is a hard arm. That would have been hard for me. Definitely don't take it personally, but very nice. I mean, you've got some of that, you know, the thing that I love about Frazetta's skies is they feel like they're actually tearing open and they have a certain hard-edged, splintery aspect to it that is really an abstract painting. And when I look at yours here, you've got these billowy clouds that are kind of a little too kind and a little too cutesy, and they don't feel the drama. I don't feel the drama of the situation or what's going on. So aside from the technical aspects of the body being a little bit wanting in certain areas, is this disjointed conceptual aspect of what it is trying to accomplish. Spider to the right, kneeling on some tapestry, kind of feels out of context to me in a cloudy environment. You know, there's just a couple things that don't make sense to me really, but I do like the ambitious aspect of it and the fact that you're really trying to put it into a contextual scene rather than just a vignetted figure. So good job. It just is a little confusing to me. Yeah, again on this one, when I like digital that I can't tell is digital. And a lot of people might say, well, yeah, but then what's the point of using digital if you're just going to make it look like a painting? I don't know. Yeah, sometimes that's my argument. Why don't you just paint it in oil, for God's sakes? But it's you know, in some ways it's easier, and digital affords you the opportunity to not have to buy tons of materials and the messiness of it and all that kind of stuff. So I totally get it. If you're living a transitory life, you're moving a lot, you don't have a lot of room as a studio, and you don't have a lot of space to work, then digital is probably your thing. When I look at it, it just has that kind of like, I can see like lower layers with layers put on top of it where they're semi-translucent layers. And it makes the person's skin look like it's slightly transparent, translucent. And I personally don't like that look. It doesn't look organic to me. It looks technique-y. I do like his head a lot. And I do like the palette you're using for the head. That's got some cool stuff going on. That has a very cool look to me, but I don't agree with like, see down in here, those little like kind of like tiled, transparent tiles that are put over the top. The proportions are decent. Again, a lot of people had problems with the foreshortening. I can see where that's happening, where there's a little photo distortion in the legs on the photograph that you guys are working from. But I would always suggest that you correct photo distortion and make it look right. And that requires that normally you've had a lot of exposure and experience drawing from live models, because otherwise how are you going to know what to do? And that's one of my real telltale signs of people not having that background, is that you can see when they're not able to correct photo distortion in their work, or that their shadows are way too dark. It usually means that they're not trained from life, and that usually is going to sometimes be the difference between a great piece and a decent piece or a good piece. So not bad overall, but that's my crit on it. So there's another digital that looks like a gouache painting to me. Just a digital looks like gouache to me most of the time. And when my dad paints, for example, my dad's a wonderful artist. If you haven't checked him out, Robert Watts, you can go over to his Instagram. But he plays with digital, and his digital looks, I can't never tell that it's not a gouache painting. I always blows me away at how well he executes in digital and makes it not look digital at all. And so when I look at a lot of these, they still have a really strong digital presence to me. And I would really encourage you to try to disguise that into looking more organic. And less, again, because I just think it's too easy to parrot, and there's too many people doing that. And so it's going to be hard to differentiate yourself from your competition if you're using digital in that manner. Like kind of 2D background that comes in front of the foreground is interesting to me, but I would caution you with such a strong, hard shaped background, maybe soften it. It looks like you tried to get a little softening right in here, but it didn't work all that well. I would say I would diffuse this edge by quite a bit. It looks like there might be a little softness here, but you're way too subtle for me to even almost pick up for it. My eye's really subtle. But I think that hard-edged background like that, although I think it's fascinating and it works better than I thought it would, maybe it's a little too much. I want him to be the center of interest, not this abstract shape in the background. So be careful with that. But otherwise, your proportion's pretty good. It looks like you actually did do a little bit of improvement in the foreshortening here, which we've had an issue with on a lot of them. Watch the vein 1, 2, 3, 4, same, visual weight. It makes his skin look like it's almost like you can press the skin and made it like a almost drapery, like compression fold or something. So be careful with that. But yeah, it needs work around the tile design and things of that sort. But it's got a pretty good feel overall. So this is interesting. It looks a little bit like Will Weston's, but he does these really cool chalk drawings on a chalkboard, anatomical drawings, and they're really cool. I dig them. So you did a good job here, and I can't get past the shadows being pink. I would have put this color out into the lights maybe, and left this the dark of the, your shadows the dark of the board. You've almost inversed everything, which makes your job 1,000 times harder. And although it's fascinating to me aesthetically, it doesn't quite resonate with me totally aesthetically. It looks a little odd, but I want to applaud you for thinking outside the box. For God's sakes, you did a wonderful job in that regard, and I think that's really something to be championed. But I don't always think that it's going to work, and when it doesn't, you just got to say, okay, I tried something. I was willing to try something. Let's go back to the drawing board and see what we can come up with. So interesting, but did catch my eye. I'll give it that for sure. Bring that up. So it looks like a little mock-up for a 3D book cover, and it's pretty cool. I mean, it's neat to see you taking it and doing a mock-up of it. The little lizard guy down there could use some work. His leg looks a little janky to me. I think some exploration of this figure in sketch mode. I personally would do it with ballpoint pen sketching or just sketching with a graphite pencil in my sketchbook and exploring the leg positioning and the torso. But in order to do that, of course, you have to be very impeccable with your sketching skills. So sketchbooking skills have to be very good before you maybe shoot a model or build a little maquette sculpture like Gurney does. That's another wonderful way to go about it. But yeah, that little guy, he just doesn't quite work for me. He just looks out of whack. The figure that's been based on a photo, you've got a slight down view. So you're taking an eye level shot and you're making it into a bird's eye shot. So the perspective, we're now looking down on it, and you did a pretty good job of getting that to work. So you flip the image and then you put it from above. So you did a pretty good job because there's a lot of figure invention that was required there. And I think it's decent, but it's got some work. It's just got a lot of dead space to the left compositionally. It needs work for sure. But that would require more getting into what would the art. If I played art director on it, I'd have a lot of questions to ask about a lot of this dead space and stuff. So that being said, kudos for ambition and trying to do something a little different. So this one's cool. Kudos for creativity. Stylization of the body, human form. I'd like to see it from different angles. It'd be fun to just wrap around it if it was a ZBrush or something or a 3D, program, and you could actually, roll around it. But I dig it. I think it's cool. I think it's really cool interpretation. Okay, this is a traditional oil painting. It looks like it's done on the oil paper that I've been using. It's not bad. If it was done say in 40 minutes or something, I would say, that's a good gesture. If it was like a 3-hour effort, then I would critique it differently, right? Because I'd be a lot harsher on the proportion and stuff if it was a 3-hour. If it's a 40, I'm going to let a little bit of the proportion slip. I'm going to let a little bit of the academia slip because it's more of an expressive painting at that point. And you're really working on getting mood, emotion, strength, into the piece versus more of an accurate rendition, which when we given more time, I want to see both. But so that being said, I think it's a wonderful little gesture. Maybe if it is a gesture, the head indication is very nice. Background's not my favorite, almost like premeditated, chaotic. And I would have put my palette knife through there. I would have rubbed my finger through it aggressively, my hand. I would have smeared with a brush. I would have aggressively kind of pulled out up around maybe here a lot more. Put some heavy Gamsol and let it drip down. And this line's too hard here. This one's too soft and gauzy here. So you have these, like this and this create a huge amount of tension. You've got the whitest white of the painting and the darkest dark of the painting right here, creating a triangle in the corner, more or less, and detracting from anything on this figure. And that's a big faux pas, right? That's a big faux pas. We want the interest up here. And if up here, we probably want it up in this area. And then we want to travel down through it. And then I get caught up in all these abrasive edges. And I get caught up in this. And this has nothing to do with the figure at all. Watch this hard edge. Hard. Can we get any harder for too long, right? So soften somewhere along there, especially since it's on the bottom side. And that would want to really roll. And when you want to roll a form like that, softs recede, crisp edges come forward. So when you razor sharp that bottom of that rear, it's popping right, it's hitting me right in the forehead. Keep this air gap between the leg a slightly darker value so that it doesn't pop again in front of the figure. That's just an old trick, whether you're painting negative pockets in a sky with a tree outside, you always want to darken up those negative spots a little bit, even though you know that these two values are the same. You want to darken this so that it sits back and lays down a little bit, and it'll work very well. So, something to keep in mind, but good job. So I'm not sure. I mean, this almost looks like it was done in Sculpey, or it could be ZBrush looking like Sculpey. Yeah, this one almost looks like it's maybe traditional clay. If not, you did a wonderful job of the illusion of clay. I personally like in sculpture, and this is just me, to get some noise in there, just like I do in a drawing with cross contouring. I like to see claw marks of my rakes. I used to make my own rakes out of guitar strings and out of jeweler's blades. And then you could rake really finely over the top, cross contouring over the top of your sculpture and create all kinds of little mosaics of almost like cross contouring with a graphite pencil. And it gave it that undoughy looking, so it didn't look like the person was just like made out of rubber. Gave him a nice organic look. And one of my favorite sculptors is Richard McDonald for contemporary sculpture. One of my favorite deceased sculptures is Bernini. And then and I also like Rodin's work, the power of his work, but his cartoony version of big hands and huge head, huge hands, huge feet is real cool, but he's very powerful. So as I look at this one, your proportions are good. It's a very beautifully done piece, regardless. Like there's a lot of beauty accuracy, and the hair is not easy, and you've done a really kind of cool job on that. And it's a very, very, very splendid piece in a lot of ways, and it's quite proportional. I think he has got more hunch in his back, and he's hunched over a little bit more, and you've put him a little bit more erect and a little bit more upright, which loses a little bit of the power of the pose. So the only thing I would critique from a staging standpoint is getting his back more bent over and getting him more like hunched into the pose, and it would feel a little more relaxed. And here he feels like he's really taking a pose, and he's a little more uptight. And I think that it would be nice to have him have a little bit more of an organic feel to his pose. So that's all, but really nicely done. So this looks like a charcoal drawing that I would see from one of our students, like a lay-in from like a 20-minute lay-in class or something. It's got some nice stuff. The head's too small. I would work on rhythmically tying together arc lines. And especially in the back. The back is such a wonderful, especially his, for heavy abstraction use. And what I do is I customize the abstraction to the body type of the person I'm working from. It's like abstract thinking, right? So when we say it's a rhythmical grid system, like a GPS system for drawing, it very much is that, but it's also a bendable, pliable equation based on really knowing what's there, but then recognizing the uniqueness of individuals. So when I look at this one, it just really could use tie together in a lot of your shapes, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I see those shapes on it, but they don't. These look like they're glued on almost, or like slabs of meat just thrown on there or something. I want to see like that roll. This should be a lot softer core shadow here. We want to run this too. I like angularity, but not that much, man. round that off a little bit, then find your straights in the joints, in the elbows, in the connector points, in the knee, in the hip. He's a very difficult guy to find straights on. He's a rounded form. So again, from that standpoint, very much like a lot of the Renaissance artists. This right here turns the corner, the trapezius. It makes a little W shape here, if you ever look at their insertion. And then you don't really bridge this very well right here. It comes to a point, I would have pulled a little shadow over, linking into this form shadow. And this form shadow would fluctuate in width based on the musculature here. So I want to see a little bit more drawing through the form, the underpinnings of the abstraction still kind of left in the drawing, and then you can bring it up to a finish. But it's a really nice drawing. But those are the things that I think would improve it. There's some room for improvement around the elbow and up in the musculature of the delt. So yeah, and then again, that foot needs to be worked on everybody. Do not copy that toe, whatever that's going on there. It's like he's missing 4 toes or something. I don't know what is happening there. It looks really weird. All right, everybody. So the moment we're all been waiting for is the winners. You guys did a wonderful job, and I know how hard this stuff is. Keep doing these challenges. Keep working on your fundamentals, whether with us or with Proko or with other places. Just get in there, do the proper training, and you will be in the winner's circle before you know it. So the one I picked for third was a beautiful figure drawing with gorgeous general edges, and just the overall feel of it I think is just really, really poetically beautiful. And I like the use of decors. I like that kind of slightly negative look to it, where it looks almost like a film negative from the old school days with the cores, and then you just kind of bleed out the interior. I think there was some room a little bit for maybe some diving into those shadows a little bit and pulling out a little bit more, but I do like some of the choices that were made for lost edges, and the proportions were right on. And I think it was just generally a very, very nicely done job. The only small caveat I think I would leave with it is just, again, watch that mastoid muscle, and maybe the drapery could have been massaged out a little bit more as far as its integrity of who's in front of who and all that kind of good stuff. But a wonderful effort, very beautiful figure drawing. Kudos to the artist, and keep up the great work. You're doing fantastic. Okay, so this drawing, I did do a general critique on it, early in the session. And I think it still carried a lot of really just beautiful handling, and the overall strength of it, I think it's a really beautiful drawing. And I think if he was to do some of those little corrections on it, it would be an outstanding drawing. So I'm going to give that one second place. And congratulations, and keep up the good work. And just take those little pearls of wisdom, hopefully, that I gave you, and run with them. And I think you're well on your way to some really, really wonderful drawings. So great job. My winner for this competition, or for this particular challenge, was this particular painting. This one's got a very, very nicely set up academic painting look to it. It has room for improvement, but it's got a really nice feel, and that head is gorgeous. And I just felt like it had a really good proportions, gorgeous hands. The hand, especially on the knee, draped over it, is really beautifully done. The vein networks and everything's very subtle. There's a lot of subtlety and a lot of little ambiance and subtlety to this painting. To me, and again, I judge a lot on the technical aspects of craftsmanship, and I think this one exemplified a lot of what I would be looking for. So anyway, congratulations to you on the win, and keep up the hard work, and you've got a bright future, all of you do. And I just had such a thrill looking through all these pieces and the variety. We can only pick 3, and that's always the difficult part of being a judge. I will be coming out with a Bridgman course and a Bridgman book, 2 volumes, very robust, each one of them about 150 to 200 pages. Each book has video embedded in the actual book with QR codes, so you can actually just go along with the book. But it'll be about 40 hours of Bridgman, and I will be doing a month of YouTube demonstrations of what's in the different techniques that are in the book, and I will also be doing one for the Proko that will be coming out just prior to the release of that book. And I think it'll be a fun kind of context for you guys to look at, because I know a lot of people struggle with that book, and a lot of people struggle with studying anatomy from him and wondering how to exactly do it. I'll be answering a lot of those questions for you. If you guys like what you hear and you like it, please pass on our YouTube channel, Watts Atelier YouTube. You can go over there. You can also go to www.wattsatelier.com and check out what we're doing. And I'd love to see you in some streaming courses or even online. Keep up the good work, you guys. And hope to see you maybe in one of our programs down the road. And we'll go from there. Have a good one. Cheers.